Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today we want to talk about this bloody big bugger over here. We're going to talk about the QNAP TVS-h874T, their first Thunderbolt 4 NAS system. Indeed, the first and currently, at least at the time of recording, only Thunderbolt 4 NAS in the world. And in today's video, I'm going to be giving you 5 reasons why this thing is definitely worth considering in your post-production photo and video editing suites. But I'm also going to give you 5 reasons why you might want to sit on the fence or completely ignore it altogether. We're working on a big review here at NAS Compares. It's going to be about 55 minutes long. It's going to be a hardware review, it's going to be a breakdown of all the components, it's going to be software, it's going to be hardware, it's going to be performance testing, it's going to be the works, and it's going to be huge. And you know what? It's taking its sweet time. So in the meantime, I'm working on this before you buy or should you buy video for you guys. I'm not quite sure how these are all going to go and what order they're going to go in, but I thought this is one because a lot of you are already asking about this device and whether to sit on the fence and go for it when it does arrive in your local region, or if it's not worth waiting for and there are better options out there. But without wasting any more time, let's crack on with number 1. Let's be honest, it's a bit of an obvious one, this, but yeah, it's a Thunderbolt 4 NAS. That's got to be something good for it. What does that actually mean, though? If you're working in the field of post-production, you don't care about gigabytes and terabytes until you start running out of them, right? You're focused way more on aperture, frame rate, picture quality and stuff like that. So let me just immediately break down why Thunderbolt 4 NAS is important to you. This thing is about reinventing your workflow. What do I mean by that? Well, currently when it comes to a lot of photo video post-production, I think the majority of users in that field will come down to 2 very specific areas. There'll be those of you that edit directly on your PC or Mac system, you're editing directly off the drive inside. Maybe you are, on the other hand, in the other party, where you're connecting an external drive. Perhaps, you know, a G-Tech, a Lacey, some other, some drives inside an OWC case, something like that. But you're connecting an external drive and editing on the external drive because the projects are getting so big. And eventually down the line you go, do you know what? We've got to back these bad boys up. We've got to put them somewhere so we can access them and share them. So you stick them on a cloud, you stick them on a NAS, you stick them on those different devices, and ultimately you end up spreading your data out, and you have to work out, have I backed that up to that, and is that a backup, have I got more than one copy? That's where the simplification of the workflow of the Thunderbolt 4 NAS system comes in. The idea is that this system arriving with not only Thunderbolt 4 connectivity but network connectivity allows you to simplify that workflow. Your PC or Mac system here, you're working on it, you're doing your editing, but you're not working on the drive that's in the system. You are connected to this via Thunderbolt 3 or 4 USB Type-C. Connected into your local system, you're working along, you're editing that file, the data is on here, you've got local cached here, but you're editing on the NAS. Now while you're doing that, you are using non-linear editing in order to make sure that you're not editing files that you don't want to edit permanently, and moreover, while you're doing that, when you finish productions, other people in your operation, in your small or larger business, are able now to access the data on this system via the local area network. They can utilise that data for packaging, metadata, chapter, little tweaks, improvements, thumbnails, social sharing and the like. But on top of that, the system can also be accessed remotely via the internet with the people that you want to access it, password protected, encrypted, etc. With those, be they your clients or other members of your teams, can access this device from the comfort of their home or the other side of the world. Yes, they can't get the same performance as they would if they sat down and connected to it directly, but nonetheless, that means a single storage system is now able to be accessed remotely on the local area network. That's everyone in your office and home that are sharing the internet. Huge oversimplification there, but also connected via Thunderbolt as well. This one system, and I know you're thinking, that's a lot of eggs in one basket, right? Well, it can also be attached to the cloud. It can also bolt on cloud storage. It can bolt on USB storage. It can be connected remotely to another NAS, either on the local area network or remotely over the internet. Ultimately, this one system allows you to create multiple pools inside, as well as synchronize and automate the passage of data between all of those locations, so you're able to stop thinking about data and keep thinking about production. This next point is another one of those slightly knobby data and network centric things that a lot of you photo and video editors just don't have time for until you suddenly have to make time for it. And that is to do with the SSDs and the fact that this system supports Gen 4 SSDs. Now again, whether it is you're using the drive inside your system or an external drive, chances are if you're photo or video editing in 2023 going into 2024, you're using SSDs, because SSDs are way faster than hard drives. The capacity is smaller, the price is higher, but the performance is massive. And modern generation SSDs currently available in Gen 4 or Gen 5, arriving in these little things known as M2 NVMe SSDs that look like this. Those SSDs give really fast performance. However, Gen 4 SSDs, which give you 7,000 megabytes per second and above, or 7 gigabytes data transfer per second, there's not a lot of NASs out there that support those drives. Indeed, laptops and PCs that have Gen 4 support have only been around for about 2 to 3 years, really, commercially. However, this system supports them. So inside this system, not only can you use Brent's 7,300 megabytes per second, or even 8 TB Gen 4 SSDs, which again crank out 7,300 megabytes per second. You've got WD's more affordable drives. You've got Seagate's more durable drives. There are loads of M2 SSDs that work in this that give you that insane performance inside, with the added benefit that, one, it allows you to create a tiered storage system where when you are editing on this device, your editors can connect to this via 4 Thunderbolt ports, 2 by default, and you can add another 2 afterwards via an optional card. Those 4 editors can edit directly on the super fast storage media, but you can partially populate this if you choose 3, 4, 5 drives with slightly faster hard drives or SATA SSDs, and that becomes your warm area of storage, allowing the system to automate sending data from the super fast SSDs that are supported and synchronize them in the background to the mid-speed drive media here, and that mid-speed drive media is being accessed by people on the local area network. And then you can have a cold storage area, which again, with the thanks to the system's GUI and QUTS and QTS backup and synchronization tools that are incredibly user-friendly by comparison to what we use a lot of the like code level stuff, it allows you to create that triple tier storage system where you've got the super fast area of storage for your editors, your mid-level performance, which again you can achieve with standard hard drives in the right RAID for your staff and more, and you've got cold level storage for long term alongside that backing up remotely. And again, the support of Gen 4 SSDs on this is really rare. Trust me, there's only about 8 or 9 commercial NASs that I know of, all but one of which, by the way, are available from QNAP, that support Gen 4 SSDs. And Gen 4 SSDs have started coming down in price because of Gen 5. Gen 5 is something we're not really going to see on NAS in a desktop form for quite a while yet. But nonetheless, if you are an editor, that performance boost for 4K, even going into 8K, is going to be an enormous improvement. And carrying on once again with the subject of a lot of content creators that sit there suddenly going, I've got to learn what about storage now? Storage is so boring. Tell me about it. Well, expandability and the range and the customization of storage on this really needs its own little point on this list. Notwithstanding that if you are utilizing an external drive, so if you're using a G-Tech or Lacy box, or even if you've still got an old Drobo knocking around, if you've got those devices, expandability is tough. Not a lot of them actually allow you to add more enclosures and daisy chain them to keep that single storage. You have to add other storage devices. There's a limitation to what you can do with that, and also the management becomes complex. On top of that, if you're using local storage inside your system, expandability is even harder. This, on the other hand, not only have you got the 8 bays of storage, which, by the way, you can introduce new drives if you want, or go with just 2 drives on day one if you like, and just add drives gradually with support with ZFS for triple parity RAID. That's 3 safety nets if your drive's failing. But on top of that, you can add expansion devices. You can add on USB and PCIe expansion devices that start at 2 and 4 bays and go all the way up to 16 bay and even rack mount expansions, which can be connected with this. And once connected, anyone connected via the local area network, Thunderbolt or remotely, has access to that new storage. All of which just allows you to expand the existing array, not add new little blobs that have got their own addresses, just continue expanding the main one, not have to change any of the crap around the edges. On top of that, USB support allows you to add USB drives and make them remotely accessible. Also, allowing you to bolt on and mount remote level storage that ranges from Backblaze to Dropbox to Google Drive to iCloud to Amazon S3 to any other level block or file level storage that you want to go for. You can bolt that storage on so all of it's accessible via that single cable between you and that device. On top of that, if that's not enough, you can add other NAS devices. Thanks to real-time remote replication, RTRR and rsync, you can just, and of course a virtual JBOD and hybrid mount from QNAP, allow you to have another NAS in another area of the world or in the same office with this, and just add that storage. Once again, allowing you to access all of it via that single cable. And I didn't even touch on the fact that this system's compatibility is a joke how open it is. Unlike certain brands, let's say in NAS, their name begins with S, who are being very creative recently when it comes to the compatibility listings. And that's making a lot of people wonder about when they want to use more modern, larger hard drives from brands they're familiar with, WD, Seagate, Toshiba and more. This system has none of those limitations on its compatibility. It's much broader, it's more regularly updated, and there are more hard drives and SSDs on their compatibility listings than any other brand out there. I cannot recommend that enough. Mixed file system cross-platform sharing. There's a lot of words I just said there, right? Well, let me put that into a bit of perspective, okay? Once again, let's go back to if you were using an external drive, move the mic, an external drive in terms of doing your editing. If you're connecting that to a Windows or Mac system, there's a probably higher possibility, if you were using all of your defaults when you first connected it, that you're using a proprietary file system that your Windows, Mac, or in some cases Linux, although that is more open, system is using. The result is that the minute you try to connect that external drive with another operating system, which the larger that your organization, chances are your creatives are using Macs, your distribution is using Windows, and your clients are using whatever, the result is that that storage will either need to be reinitialized and reformatted in order to be used, in which case your data is lost, or they will have to make sure they support certain file systems and licenses on their client systems, exFAT being a great example. Now, cross-platform file sharing on this means that when the data is in this, thanks to ext4 or ZFS file systems managing the data, it becomes completely accessible, visible and usable by Mac, by Windows, by iOS, by Android, by Ubuntu, by all of them. So it allows you to have a single storage system accessible in a multitude of different ways, but also supported. And that goes all the way down to if you're a Mac user with HEIC support and complex codecs, allowing those photos and images that you back up to the device to be accessible and visible from another third-party OS that isn't the same as the one that sent the photos in the first place, thanks to transcoding and conversion support within this very powerful Intel 12th Gen i7 and i9 system. Ultimately, that file system crossover support is going to be another reason why that simplified workflow is just going to be a dream on this once you've got it set up. Utilising this as a 10 gigabit Ethernet network gateway and more needs to get more respect than it does, because this is when we're really getting into the weeds when it comes into the field of overly complex data storage kind of terminology that a lot of content creators don't want to spend time learning, understandably. Now, at the moment, your network environment, again, that is the same network that everyone is utilising in an office or home space. Again, if you want to be really simple about it, it's the Wi-Fi connection everyone's using and the internet, but that's really not the case. It's ultimately a loop that everyone is on. If you're in more advanced stakes or a larger scale business environment or an upgraded home environment, chances are you've got greater than gigabit network connections. You might be using 10 GBE, 5 GBE, 2.5 GBE. You may be even scaling the dizzy heights of 25 gig or even 100 gig at the enterprise level. The result is that you've got this massively fast network environment knocking around, but your PC or Mac system might be, as a lot of devices are, by default, a gigabit network. That means that you can only get 109 megabytes per second maximum performance upload and download on that network environment. And it might be the same for your internet as well, if you're sharing on that. Now, the point I'm making is, you want to take advantage of those faster speeds. Now, there are ways. You could upgrade your PC or Mac system with a PCIe card. You could upgrade it with a USB upgrade. But again, and you can even go ahead, I should add, with a Thunderbolt to 10 GBE upgrade. These things all cost a bit of extra money. However, this device here Once you've connected to it with Thunderbolt, it becomes a network passover. What that means is this device now if it's connected to 10 GBE, if it's connected to 25 GBE, ultimately this device, once it's connected to your larger local area network with its higher performance, acts as a gateway to that network. So you can use your 1 gigabit network Mac or Windows system, connect to this via Thunderbolt, and whatever network speed this is connected to, you're getting it. Limitation is just Thunderbolt there for you for the data being passed through the system. It acts as a network gateway and allows the system to really take advantage of larger network bandwidth speeds for everyone else to enjoy. And that goes as well for if this device is connected remotely to a much faster network and faster internet going into your business or home environment. This can take advantage of those larger speeds with the right network connection behind it. Ultimately, as a network gateway, there's a lot to be said for this reinventing that network workflow in your home or business environment and improving performance speeds and data transmission speeds therein. But as good as all that sounds, this isn't for everyone. Let's go through 5 reasons why you might want to sit on the fence a little bit longer or just shop elsewhere.
That's just the way it is.
Let's be honest, it's probably one of the biggest issues for a lot of users. Man alive, that price tag is scary. Knocking around, depending on which configuration you go for, it can start at $2,499, going all the way up to $3,500 with different configurations available in terms of memory and the CPU that's included. There's a lot of money. And remember, that doesn't include the storage media either. This is not a cheap solution, and there is absolutely no denying, and QNAP don't try to deny it, that because you are the only ones in the market that produce this kind of solution, a Thunderbolt NAS, there is absolutely no way you are not paying extra for that exclusivity as an end user. Now, again, maybe you're not going to use all of those features and services, but if you are looking at a Thunderbolt NAS system and all you are going to use it for is a point-to-point storage, chances are Thunderbolt NAS is going to be outlandishly expensive when you compare it against a G-Tech, a Lacey, or even a, I think Seagate have still got some of the Thunderbolt devices in the game. I just feel like that price, there is definitely an exclusivity tax where you are paying extra for a system because of its exclusivity to a kind of technology there. And if you're not happy with that, you're not going to like that price.
Come on, that's just the way it is.
And returning to those comparisons I made there at the end between Thunderbolt NAS and Thunderbolt DAS, I will say a lot of people that go for a Thunderbolt NAS, one of the first things they don't realise, because I don't think it's spoken about loudly enough, although it is more than it used to be, is the fact that Thunderbolt NAS does not give you the same performance as Thunderbolt DAS, network attached storage, and DAS, direct attached storage, also known as LAS, local attached storage. Now, why is that? Well, look at this 8-bay device. If you look at 8-bays again, Lacey, we look at G-Tech as well, those devices, they use one-to-one connectivity. Ultimately, that means with easier plug-and-play setup, you're accessing the data in a very simple form, and it's only one user that can access it. In the case of NAS, it's using IP. That protocol that it's going to be utilising there means that the system is maintaining like the operating system running inside, all of that remote access stuff that I mentioned earlier on, and the way the system is mounted in storage is nowhere near as straightforward or as simplistic in its architecture for your system to interact with. Ultimately, that means that the same 8 drives inside this system, if they were placed in a Thunderbolt DAS system, you will get higher performance from the DAS because there is more overhead going on inside the NAS system. Again, that means that if you were going to use any of those extra workflow improvements I mentioned earlier on, then you're going to be hitting limitations with the performance here.
That's just the way it is.
Which abruptly brings us to the subject, by the way, of 25 gigabit Ethernet. Now, up until this point, I've talked about people interfacing with this device via Thunderbolt, using a Mac or Windows system, Thunderbolt cable, going directly into this to get that level of performance. And the number of drives you put inside and the caliber of those drives, Gen 4 SSDs, hard drives, whatever, will dictate the performance you can get. Whenever we're talking about Thunderbolt and 25 GBE and network, these are all just pipes, like the pipes in your house. The size of the pipes in your house generally do not dictate much about performance. Sometimes you can use a lot of water pressure in a small pipe and the water blasts out, or the pipe's too big and there's not enough water going through it and the pressure's all wrong. These are all just terms for pipes. But it's the drives inside that are driving water and the amount of water through said pipes. All of the bandwidth, the Thunderbolt, the 25 GBE, they're just a different size of pipe. However, whereas Thunderbolt on this device will go somewhere between, if you fully populate this with SSD, somewhere in the region of 1200 to 1400 megabytes per second, maybe hitting 1500. If you use a 25 gigabit Ethernet card on this device and the right media, this system can hit speeds dictated and published on QNAP's own website of 3000 and higher megabytes per second, and well in excess of 300,000 4K random IOPS. That means the smallest data packet being accessed per second, how many can be done, and it hits 300,000 there, read and write 4K random respectively. The point I'm making is that the hardware inside this system is insane, but some cases you're going to find that the Thunderbolt ports here can act as a bottleneck, and if you were looking at this device for its top end performance, you will achieve higher performance numbers than you get on those Thunderbolt ports with a 25 GBE card installed, 1 or 2 port, and QNAP supply them, but this system does not include them. Those are expensive cards, and I get it, this is focusing more towards Thunderbolt connectivity there, but it's really worth highlighting that if performance and just sheer massive bandwidth performance is what is the most important to you, then chances are a Thunderbolt NAS is not going to be for you. A 25 gigabit Ethernet NAS is.
Come on, that's just the way it is.
This next point is probably going to come across just a wee bit petulant for some of you out there, but here's the accessory box that this thing arrives with, right? Wrap it open, we've got information on our warranty instruction manual, we've got our mains power cable, we've got screws for 2.5 inch and 3.5 inch media, we've got keys to lock the trays, we've got heat sinks for the SSDs, and we've got an Ethernet cable there included. Do you know what's missing? A Thunderbolt 4 cable. This is a Thunderbolt 4 NAS. Why does it not include a Thunderbolt cable? I know that doesn't seem like much, but anyone that's used to using Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4 for a number of years knows you can't get those performance numbers unless you use specific Thunderbolt cables. If you use standard USB-C cables, you might be able to connect with it, but you won't get the performance. It doesn't have the power delivery or the bandwidth that Thunderbolt cables actually include. And Thunderbolt cables are not cheap, by the way. They're not outlandishly expensive, but they're certainly more expensive than USB cables. And the fact that this system's rocking out the gate with that price tag I mentioned earlier on, I find it a wee bit annoying that they don't include the cable. If I buy Billy Basic Thunderbolt adapters and Thunderbolt docking stations, all of those devices arrive with a cable. So why does QNAP not include a cable? If it's such a cheap cable, then throw one in. If it's such an expensive cable and it's not going to affect the price, don't have the box that pricey and expensive to start with. And again, for those of you that are going to talk about e-waste, for those of you that are going to talk about having cables knocking around in drawers, Thunderbolt cables are not that common. These aren't your standard blocky USB type B ports that your old printer had. Not a lot of people have got these cables knocking around in their drawers, so I'm really disappointed in QNAP not including them with this system. And talking about things that aren't included, I've got to say, the fact that this system does not arrive with a 10 gigabit Ethernet port included with it, when every other Thunderbolt system that QNAP has ever released has 10 gigabit Ethernet on board. Do you remember that Passover thing I mentioned earlier on? With this system, you have to buy the card yourself. You have to go out and spend 100, 200 nicker on a card. And yeah, there are some great combo cards out there that allow you to take advantage of the Gen 4 architecture. But still, the fact that this system does not arrive with 10 GBE, it's got a couple of 2.5 gig ports, lovely. But the lack of 10 GBE on this system winds me up. And that combined with the Thunderbolt 4 cable missing, it's just little things like that I think QNAP could maybe have stretched their arm a bit and included in this.
Come on, that's just the way it is.
And finally, Deadbolt. We've got to talk about it. I'm sure QNAP are sick of me bringing it up, but It's still going to be a while before I don't mention Deadbolt in every single QNAP review I do. Maybe give it 3 or 4 years of a clean record. Why is that? Well, you may not be aware, but a few years ago, QNAP, alongside a bunch of other NAS brands, were targeted by a ransomware group known as the Deadbolt ransomware group. Again, it wasn't just QNAP, other brands were targeted, successfully targeted. It was a command that was made its way remotely onto certain NAS systems, again QNAP, TerraMaster, Acer Store, and when that command got inside, it made the system encrypt the entire contents. It encrypted the entire contents and then left a little tiny ransomware note. We had to pay the attackers money via Bitcoin in order to get a key to unlock your data. They didn't steal the data, they didn't upload or download, they injected a command, and in order to do that, the system needed to allow a gap for intruders to get in, an attack vector. Now, QNAP provides many ways to back up the data inside this system. We've gone through a bunch of them today already. There's also support of write once, read many that allows you to have the data on the system be added to but not be edited in its original form. Then you've got snapshot and you've got real-time remote replication to send data periodically offsite. You've got loads of tools, but still nonetheless, that alongside regular firmware updates, a lot of users were not happy that their systems were successfully targeted. And also the way that QNAP handled it afterward with quote-unquote forced updates, depending on how you look at the way the architecture is happening in place, really did blur the lines between when the attack happened, how much of the responsibility fell on the users and their NAS and their maintenance and network maintenance and data storage upkeep versus the commitments from the brand to allow such a thing to have happened. Again, vulnerabilities in software is not new. This is a circular thing where, and this isn't just NAS by the way, we're going all the way into Microsoft, Apple and whatever for the last 30 years. A software comes out, vulnerabilities are found by attackers, a firmware update patches it out, they attack that new firmware for vulnerabilities, and so on and so forth. Indeed, nearly all of the NAS brands that we talk about are using Linux, and Linux itself regularly has vulnerabilities found, which they immediately patch, but it's a bigger job for everyone building on top of that to patch those. And indeed, just because they're not, weren't affected by Deadbolt, Synology were hit. Now, I think a little bit over a decade ago, they were hit by SynoLocker, a very similar malware that locked people out of their data in their systems. And again, this isn't new. From WD to other NAS brands as well, lots of people have been targeted by ransomware, been targeted by malware, been targeted by viruses. So why am I including on this list about QNAP if everyone's as susceptible as anyone else? It's because QNAP really took their foot, they took their eye off the ball. They were targeted by 3 different ransomware attacks over the course of a few years. QLocker, QSnatch, and Deadbolt, and that was what really hurt them. Now, they have implemented a lot of changes in their security, their remote access, and the forced defaults of the system. Many, I might add, have been implemented there. But still, nonetheless, I think it's very, very important before buying their systems that you are aware of the past. They have made changes to a lot of their software, but I think we still have to give them at least a few more years of being reminded about this with an unhit record before we're prepared to let them off about it. In the same way, we don't mention Synology's failings in terms of their security with SynoLocker because, again, they really took a lot of those hits to heart. If you're only going to use this device on the local area network, connected via Thunderbolt, the local area network, you've got sufficient firewalls in place, you're going to have those security updates, or you're just going to make sure the system never connects to the internet, these are all really moot points because there's no real attack vectors being open there, aside from your client device, if you download some shoddy patched email attachment that then infects the rest of your local area network. Ultimately, if you were never going to use this device remotely or not use unsecure credentials and not use unsecure or unencrypted or non-VPN means to connect with this device, or you don't have a sufficient firewall and you weren't going to utilize it in that manner, then you're going to be fine as long as you practice due diligence around your local area environment and your network environment, your storage environment, and make sure that this isn't the only repository of that data. If all of your data being sent from all of those devices goes on this and then you delete it from those devices, this thing ain't a backup anymore. It is the only source of that data. You need to have this elsewhere, and that's where it comes that blurry line between the user and the brand. But there you go, that is the TVS-h874 before you buy. As I say, the real massive review is being worked on. I know this is still a long video, but this is a big spend, so you're going to have to forgive me that even the before you buy was going to run on just a wee bit long. Now, this system I like it. I like the Thunderbolt NAS exists. I think it's good for the industry. So even though I've given you 5 good reasons and 5 bad reasons, don't focus on any one of those and think of the broader picture on your own network editing setup there. Bear in mind that there are other options out there, but there are very few devices that give you this amount of power and this much connectivity in a single solution. So if chances are, if you've landed on this subject, this device with your searches, you're just going to keep coming back round to it. Stay tuned for the full review where we go into way more detail about what this device can do, what's good and what's bad about it, which really alliterates and expands upon all of the points covered today. If you need further assistance on your data storage setup, for your video editing, for your photo editing, your multimedia or whatever, you can use the free advice section linked on NAS Compares. It's the big blue button on the right side of every page. You can hire me directly or contact me directly via Robbie@NAS Compares, or you can hire me via Ko-Fi and Patreon in our paid consultancy service built in there. I can barely say the word, it's so weird. On top of that, there's our Discord and our free advice section over on the forum Ask.NAS Compares. There's a link in the description to the full written review. We're already starting to update some of the benchmarks and more, and if there are further tests that you want to see, power consumption and noise, bear that in mind. Do stay tuned for that as well. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Lots of resources linked in the description, and I'll see you next time.